Welcome, everyone. My name is Kea Maitra, and I am the director of the Humanities Program at UNC Asheville. A few weeks ago, my colleague, Dr. Samuel Kaplan, mentioned that we have the good fortune to host Rabbi Joseph Polak at UNCA, and he also asked me if the Humanities Program would like to go in as a co-sponsor, along with the Center for Jewish Studies. Of course, to be a part of hosting Rabbi Polak on our campus is a wonderful opportunity for the Humanities Program, especially because his life's work and his presence at Boston University, his work for upholding justice, for valuing human experience, overcoming hardships, goes to the heart of the values and that we stand for in our humanities program. So I really welcome that opportunity, and I thank Professor Kaplan for giving us that opportunity. So I'm really happy to be welcoming, and it's my honor to be welcoming Rabbi Polak. I'm very much looking forward to, along with you. I'm so glad to see you all here. So now I will actually invite Dr. Sam Kaplan to introduce Rabbi Polak, but let me say just a little bit, if you don't know already, about Dr. Kaplan. He wears many hats. He is the director of the Center for Jewish Studies at UNC Asheville. He is also a professor of mathematics and statistics at UNC Asheville. He's also the director of Asheville Initiative for Math, and he is the co-director of Marvelous Math Club. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Kaplan.
Thank you, Dr. Maitre, and I suddenly feel very tired. Okay. So my name is Sam Kaplan. I am a faculty member here at UNC Asheville. Thank you so much for coming out tonight in spite of the bad weather to hear Rabbi Polak talk about his life and what he's learned. He was born in 1942 at The Hague, Netherlands. Rabbi Polak endured Westerbork and Bergen-Belsen concentration camps during his infancy. His early experiences have profoundly shaped his life's work, including a longtime director of Hillel House at Boston University. He was a guiding force for many generations of students through there and continues to contribute to academia through his affiliation with the School of Public Health at Boston University. He also is the Chief Justice of the Rabbinical Court of Massachusetts, and he there in that capacity addresses many complex issues of Jewish law. His autobiography, After the Holocaust, The Bells Still Ring, was awarded the Jewish National Book Award in 2015 and offers an exploration of survival and memory. The introduction, written by Elie Wiesel, acknowledges the profound contribution that book and his work has contributed to Holocaust literature. On a more personal note, I was a graduate student at Boston University when I met Rabbi Polak. But I didn't know it at the time that, in fact, I had met him through his writing at a much younger age. I am a native of North Carolina from a small town called Valdez, North Carolina, which is between Morganton and Hickory, or if you say it correctly. I was born and bred in Valdez, North Carolina. It's right between Morton and Hickory, not even an hour down the mountain. Hour and a quarter in my old truck, and I missed that truck, which is true. I do miss that truck. But we were the only Jewish family in this small town, and one of the most influential books in my childhood was something called the Jewish Catalog. It's not where you order Jews, but it is a catalog of Jewish values and ideas, and one of the chapters in that book was written by Rabbi Polak. And so he contributed greatly to my youthful understanding and engagement of Judaism in an isolated place. The subtitle for the catalog was a do-it-yourself kit, which was definitely what we had to do all alone. So at many different levels, I am very pleased in welcoming Rabbi Polak. You wanna-
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody, for listening to me today. And imagine, it's not a nice thing to say to people, but imagine somebody coming to your house at 4 in the morning and saying, "You have to go now." Go. Truck out back. You and your family and everybody who's here. And where are we going? Taking you to a labor camp called Westerbork. We need workers. And you come out of the house and you look back, do I lock the door? Do I take my keys? What do I take with me? What do I take with me? And then you go. And you're taken to Westerbork, and I'm going to tell you about Westerbork. But I want you to imagine just your last moment leaving the house. Okay? Somebody closes the door, and somewhere inside you, even though you don't know yet what's going on, something inside you says you may not see this house again. And as you're sitting in the truck, heading to Westerbork, you start stewing. And you're stewing at the humiliation of what's happening. Who the hell is telling me to get out of my house? That question and that moment is so humiliating, so insulting. There are 2 police officers that get you out of your house. They came following the truck with 2 motorcycles, and they leave the motorcycles on. And they knock at the door. And you figure out who's out there. You don't want to answer the door. They don't do anything. They don't go anywhere. They just knock. They don't get violent. Eventually, they're using the butts of their rifles to knock on the door. And then you realize they're not going away. When you realize they're not going away, that you're going to have to, excuse the word, attend to them, it's not a great feeling. Why is your gun drawn? My father, whom I don't remember, was a credit manager in some kind of office. It's a funny story. About 40 years after that night, I met a guy in Jerusalem who had worked in the same office as my father. Oh yeah, Ari Polak? I'm waiting my whole life to hear about this man, right? The last time I saw him, I was 2.5. I have no visual memory of him whatsoever. I have photographs. No visual memory of him whatsoever. Finally, I'm in this office, in this guy's house, lovely guy in Jerusalem, and he was going to tell me all about my father. Say, what was he like? Oh, clean, nice man, good conversation, What did you talk about? Oh, he says it's 40 years. How am I supposed to remember what we talked? Nothing. Got nothing from it. That's the, it's a funny story, but it's the humiliation of the Holocaust. You know what your father's like. You know what your father's like. I have no idea. That's humiliating. That's humiliating because he didn't die of cancer. He was murdered. He died of hunger. He died in his own excrement. He was a nice man. Right? And in Boston, you say that and $2 will get you on the tee. So, what I want you to hear is the humiliation of the Holocaust, the humiliation of the survivor, and that humiliation doesn't go away. It stays with you, and you may not remember anything else, but the humiliation is there. When I was finally a little older, that is to say 6 years old, we're talking December 1948. And I'm going to backtrack, but I want to tell this story. And we moved to Montreal, Canada. Montreal, Canada was a lovely place, but little Joseph Polak could still not read Hebrew. So they hired a very fine man to come to the house 2 evenings a week to teach me to read Hebrew. I was a good student. I learned Hebrew like in 6 lessons. First you learn the vowels, then first you learn the consonants, then you learn the vowels, then you put it together, and all of a sudden you're reading Hebrew. And the day and the prayer that I trained on to read the Hebrew was not the normal prayer that kids are taught who learn Hebrew for religious reasons. The normal prayer is the Shema prayer, which many of you know and have heard of. I wasn't taught Shema. What I was taught was Yiskadal v'Yiskadash. What I was learning Hebrew for was to say Kaddish, prayer for the dead, for a father I didn't know. So here I am, a 6-year-old kid, going to the synagogue at 6:30 every morning to recite the Kaddish for my dead father, whom I didn't know. And I hated it. I hated it. Why? Because I was a little 6-year-old kid like this, standing next to these, in the synagogue, a row of men saying the Kaddish for their dead, right? Except they knew their fathers, and they knew who they were saying Kaddish for. But not only did I not know who I was saying Kaddish for, but it was humiliating for me. What am I doing with these tired and bleary-eyed grown-ups? I wasn't crying for my father. It would be almost no exaggeration to say never met the guy. Where was he when I needed him? And what am I doing here at 6:30 in the morning with these guys with the creaky shoes swaying back and forth saying Kaddish? No wonder I became a rabbi. So eventually we wind up in Westerbork. Westerbork was a Dutch, wasn't called a concentration camp, it was called a transit camp. Because Westerbork was the place that all the Jews in Holland were gathered to be sent to what was euphemistically called trains to the east. And those trains went to Auschwitz, Sobibor, what's the one outside Prague? Theresienstadt, and one or two others, a limited number of camps. The immediate maddening thing about Westerbork was that nobody knew exactly why they were there. But everybody was brought there, like 2 in the morning, 5 in the morning, in groups of as many as 10,000. By the end of the war, something like 80 or 90,000 people went through Westerbork. Westerbork itself survived the war and became an army training camp. It actually became a weather observatory and is still standing there. You can go visit it. In Westerbork, there was no disease, there was no hunger. Everybody had a job of some kind. You know what there was in Westerbork? There was a beauty parlor. Can you imagine? There was all kinds of sports teams. There was a canteen, if you wanted cigarettes or lipstick. In Westerbork, there was a cabaret. And every Wednesday night, the cabaret played. And the cabaret played cabaret music, Jacques Brel. And some of the leading cabaret artists of Europe were in Westerbork, Jews. You know what there was in Westerbork? It was a hospital, a real hospital. Hospital had 1,000 beds. And it had every conceivable kind of department. They published a medical journal with findings from research done at Westerbork. All the doctors were inmates. And I'm going to tell you a story about Westerbork. And it's not in my book. All the doctors were inmates, as I said, except there's this one exception. I'll get to that story in a minute. The one thing about Westerbork that was annoying was the train. There was a train that came in every Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock and left at 11 a.m., filled with inmates of Westerbork, whom you never saw again. And when you were an inmate of Westerbork, even though you didn't know where that train was going, something inside you told you that it's not a good place that it's going. And one certainly never heard from anybody again that left Westerbork. And so the whole concept of Westerbork was to get Jews to Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen and Treblinka and to all these places without the Jews themselves knowing where they were going. And even the train driver, we call them engineers, right? The train engineer had no idea where the train was going because the train that wherever it was going to stopped 2 stations short of that point. In other words, the Auschwitz train stopped two stops before, let everybody off, gone on another train that only went to Auschwitz or wherever they were going, and the train went back, and the train rider, the engineer, had no idea where they went. But after a while, when you asked him where he was going, look at me, he would say, that was the sign. So when you got to Westerbork, on Monday nights, the German Jews who ran the whole place, you know how many soldiers there were in Westerbork, which often had more than 10,000 people at a time, taking care of everybody, making sure they didn't escape? How many soldiers there were? Not even 10. Westerbork was in the middle of a cold desert. There was nothing there. There was no, you could, also they let you, if you needed to go back to Amsterdam for something, go. Just make sure you come back because your cousin's here. So the one thing that you were deeply committed to as a resident of Westerbork was not to get on that train, right, on Tuesday morning. The best way not to get on the train on Wednesday morning was to be sick. They're not going to take you from the hospital, right, So there was always waiting room only to get in the hospital, and every disease known to mankind was conjured up. And the guy running the place, the doctor, Spanier was his name, was, as much as he could, cooperative in such a matter. Nazis didn't care. They didn't care. The whole idea of Westerbork is that when your time came to go on the train, you would not resist, you would make it easy, and make the transition from one camp to the other graceful. That was the sole purpose of Westerbork, and the Nazis did everything in their power, successfully, I must say, so that you would not resist and you would go peacefully. On Monday night, they would come into your barracks with a list. The list was the most dreaded list in the whole world. And they would read off your name, or whoever's name, and those were the people going on the train. What was it like to sit and wait and listen to those names? Some people, hearing what they heard, committed suicide. But 90% of the people were very accommodating, polite. One Jew I knew who told me about it personally. He was a young man at the time. He said, I didn't know where they were taking you. I didn't want to know. He said, so in one pocket of he says, I always slept with my jacket on my bed in the barracks. He says, in one pocket every Monday night, I put a sandwich, and in the other pocket, I put my tefillin, my Jewish equipment. And so I had my religious articles with me, and I was ready to go. The last story on Westerbork. If you want to know where this is from, ask me after the lecture. I don't want to do footnotes, okay? But I know exactly where I know this from. There's an interview with a nurse It is a filmed interview with the real nurse after the war from Westerbork. And she tells the following story. There was another Dutch concentration camp, which, unlike Westerbork, was really a bad place physically. With appels. Appels is where they get you every morning to count you, and it's 4 or 5 hours standing outside in the cold. And this camp was called Vught, V-U-G-H-T, Vught. And in Vught one morning, there was an appel, and all the people were standing outside in the cold rain, and it was in an area where the cold rain was cold. And she's pregnant. And she's standing like this, at ease, at the appel, and the baby falls out. Baby falls out. They pick up the baby, they cut the cord, and they want to bring her to a Jewish hospital that has the medical staff to take care of her and the fetus. Where do they send her? Westerbork. Baby comes to Westerbork and becomes a sensation in Westerbork. Everybody gets into it to try and save this. I don't know the exact age of the fetus, but it was very young. And everybody gets into it. Everybody in the hospital is talking about it. And soon the whole camp is talking. Can we save this? And it was like a rally thing, a hope for life in a place where there's hope only for death. And the baby becomes like some kind of a mascot. And everybody's cheering it on. And they bring in, I have to remember these details, they bring in a, what do you call it? A baby doctor for preemies. What am I thinking of? Neonatologist from Amsterdam, who wasn't Jewish because they wanted to save this baby. And it got to such a point that the baby, the nurse in the interview says, that we fanned the spirit of life into this child. The child started to take. They brought in, what do you call these little beds for neonatals? Incubator. They didn't have one. They brought in an incubator. They took care of the kid, And even the commandant, the Nazi commandant, the SS guy his name was Gemmeker, of the camp, got into it. And the doctor, I'd like to get to know this guy, said that you have to feed the baby a tiny little 2 cc's of cognac every day. And the commandant of Westerbork donated his own bottle of Hennessy cognac to save this baby. And it took. And the baby was saved. And it was a big public event that they brought the baby to the mother and said, now you're going to take care of it. This baby's fine. And that was Thursday or Friday. That Monday night, they called her name and they called the baby's name. And the next day, the baby and the mother were sent to Auschwitz, never to be heard from again. You understand that story, you understand Westerbork. That is the prototypical story of Westerbork. The cynicism, the humiliation. By April 43, there were no trains going anymore from Westerbork to Auschwitz. Auschwitz was over by then. They had started closing down the camp. And around then, mother and I and my father are sent from, on the Monday night list, we were sent to Bergen-Belsen. So let me give you a little bit of Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen, at the time that I was sent there, was a relatively small camp, about 10,000 inmates that were Jews, and up to 17,000 Russian prisoners. The latter group was treated very badly, open air exposure through the harshest winters. But there were certainly not more than 15, 20,000 people total in Bergen-Belsen. The people, the Jews that were in Bergen-Belsen were special prisoners. What's the German word? They were exchange prisoners, Antausch, exchange prisoners. And they were being held so that when the war would be over and there would be a prisoner exchange where Germany would get back its prisoners, other countries would get back theirs. And these were people in Bergen-Belsen, Jews, who had special passports and who had special connections. Our special connection was that my Uncle Jack, my mother told every Nazi soldier that came her way, her brother Jack was in the American Army looking for her. Little did they know that Uncle Jack spent his whole military career washing dishes in Fort Bragg. But it worked as a ruse. My mother was very smart and a born diplomat. Suddenly, fairly quickly, not only, I can tell you a story, Westerbork, 1943, the Jews were allowed to bake matzah. Can you imagine? In a concentration camp, a Nazi concentration camp. They did. They did. So, all things considered, you had a roof over your head, you had food to eat. Oh, and you could wear your own clothes, no prison garb and no numbers. And the prison garb, no prison garb, you wore your own clothes. And what that means is that you still had your number, right? Not your number, what's the word I'm looking for? The thing they sewed on you that said Jew, right? There were Dutch Jews in this camp, and there were Greek Jews in this camp, Hungarians, and some German Jews also. And so the camp got known, because everybody was still wearing their star, as the Star Camp, the Sternlager. And so this is how it got identified. And then things started to change. Germany starts losing the war, and it has to get rid of Sobibor. Sobibor is a camp that was strictly extermination. There was no labor in it. My grandmother, 6 of her kids, and 20 of my cousins all came to their death there within 15 minutes of arrival. You got there, you took your clothes off, you went into the so-called shower. There was no shower, there was gas. And after that, you were burned to a crisp in the ovens or even in open fields. That was Sobibor. So Sobibor ended, and all the people that were left in Sobibor, which is several thousand, are sent to Bergen-Belsen. All the people from Auschwitz are sent to Bergen-Belsen, and several other camps. And these were called the death marches, because if they're coming in December and January, talk to me. What? It's cold. And half the people died on the way on these death marches. There were books on the death marches. And the people that do come find themselves in a camp built for 10 to 15,000 people, now filled with another 40 to 60,000 people. You hear me? With no increase in food, no increase in drinking water, no increase in washing water, and most profound of all, no increase in sanitation. That means no toilets, ladies and gentlemen. There's a great literary critic, he's not alive anymore, he died young, who talks about what happens next. His name will come to me in a second, I'm having a block. He writes, Terence Despres, D-E-S-P-R-E-S. He taught at Colgate. Terence Despres writes what he calls about the excremental assault. This is not going to be pleasant, but there are no children here. Basically, you have a block, you have a residence, if you want to call it that sleeps 500-600 people. And outside there's a ring of 6 toilets. The 6 toilets do not have running water. They have their pits, they have their holes in the ground. When the increase becomes what it is in the camp by 60,000 with no increase in toilets, there's no toilet to go to. And even the toilets that you have are full. The other thing is that because of that, everyone gets typhus. Typhus is like this. I had typhus, but I don't remember. I apparently had every other disease known to man as well, but I don't remember. But typhus is, you get about 108 degrees temperature. But half the population, if it's untreated, doesn't make it. So what's going on, and the other piece of typhus is that you poop, and you poop uncontrollably. You have no control over your bowels, and you're pooping whenever you're moving and wherever you are. And there's no place to wash yourself. And if indeed, as what happened, in the barracks are now beds, bunk beds of 3 stories, a wooden pallet that you lay on some dirty straw, nothing else, and 2 people to a bed, so it's 6 people in a row, and the top one is pooping on the one below, and the one below is pooping double on the one below, and that's Bergen-Belsen. That's excremental assault, and it is not possible to survive that. The other thing that's happening in Bergen-Belsen is that there's no food. You got to think about that. You have to understand what that is, that there's no food. That means that you dream food, you fantasize food, and you steal food. And you cannot control yourself. There are food stories from Bergen-Belsen that I don't even want to tell you. And this is the world of Bergen-Belsen. I have a friend in Chicago. His name is Mike Lowenthal. He's like me. You say to him, "You were a prisoner? You don't sound like a prisoner. You don't talk like a prisoner. You don't even. You can't tell he's European." And Mike Lowenthal, he calls me a couple times a year. He remembers something that I obviously don't remember, and that not a lot of people remember, but unquestionably that it happened. He saw cannibalism in Bergen-Belsen, and he's written about it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the humiliation. When you got to Bergen-Belsen, from the train that took you to the train that brought you from Westerbork, when you got to Bergen-Belsen, you didn't get directly to Bergen-Belsen, you got to a train station that's still there. I visited it about 4 or 5 years ago again. Just a stopping point for trains. You still have to walk about a mile and a half to get to the actual Bergen-Belsen camp. So here you have people in their 80s, people in their 90s, greeted by Nazis, greeted by German shepherds that are crazy. You're pulling at their leashes to get at you, vicious, terrifying. And you have to get into double file and shuffle your way to Bergen-Belsen. So this woman writes, one of the writers describing Bergen-Belsen, she writes that as she's walking to Bergen-Belsen, there are people on the road. In other words, she's in this line of people, you know, in not great shape, old people. Westerbork was filled with old people. The old people used to ask, "Why am I here? What did I do wrong?" Which is the fundamental question of the Holocaust, right? What did I do wrong? Old people were the most confused. There was a Supreme Court justice who was a prisoner at Westerbork. And he became famous because there was never a day in his life that, in those days, they had shirts with separate collars. You remember those? I mean, you know about them? That white shirts had a collar that you put on, so you didn't have to wash the shirt. Didn't have washing machines, so you didn't have to wash the shirt every day, you know. So they put on clean collar. After a while at Westerbork, he stopped wearing that collar, and then people knew he had given up. He had given up. So that's who was coming from Westerbork to Bergen-Belsen. And she said she's walking. This woman in her young 30s, walking in this double row or triple row, I don't know, line from the train stop near Bergen-Belsen to the camp with Nazis with guns every, 8 feet. And if you didn't walk fast enough, they yelled at you and they beat you with the butts of their rifles. And she says, suddenly, we come across a group of people, German citizens, walking in the other direction. She says, wearing a clean dress. She says, the lady was going for a walk with her husband, arm in arm, the way Germans do, and nicely, beautifully coiffed out in describing leisure clothes. Today, you know what those clothes would be. And she says, and then people came by on their exercises, coming the other direction, just German citizens. And riding bicycles and ringing bells on the bicycles. Toodaloo. And no one stops. And no one says, who are these people shuffling along? And why are old people being made to walk like this? And where are you taking them? And what do you need guns for? Nothing. 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 That's humiliating. That's as humiliating as it gets. You understand that? If you understand that moment, you understand the Holocaust, and you understand what a survivor is. Because survivors don't survive. They survive with their lives, but they don't survive the humiliation. Humiliation stays with them. A 6-year-old kid saying Kaddish with a bunch of old men in the synagogue is the deepest humiliation, and you don't get past that. You think it goes away? Oh, it was something a long time ago. Not so fast. Not so fast. In 1945, April, British and the Canadian forces come into Bergen-Belsen. It was the only concentration camp liberation that was filmed. It was filmed by the British, and we have the full movies of that. And what you see is that the British coming in there and the Canadians coming in there, the first thing that they found two things. Number one, I don't want to exaggerate, but somewhere between 20 and 35,000 corpses that had to be buried. Think about, you can't imagine those numbers. Can't imagine those numbers. But if you see the films and you see the earth movers pushing the dead into the graves, you start to understand what the Holocaust was. The Star Camp, Nazis still wanted to save. So 3 trains left Bergen-Belsen about a week before the British got there. Got it? About a week. So in other words, 3 trains left Bergen-Belsen. April 7th, April 6th, April 7th, and April 9th. The April 6th one was filled with Greek and German Jews and Polish Jews. And all 3 trains were heading to Theresienstadt, which was a camp of artists and fancy people, also valuable people, so to quote, in right outside Prague. That train did not get very far. It was liberated en route by American soldiers somewhere near Berlin. The second train, made up almost entirely of Hungarian Jews, this is April 7th, makes it to Theresienstadt. The third train drops off the face of the earth, and for years no one knew what happened to it. As recently as 6-7 years ago, an historian at Yad Vashem said that we have no idea what happened to this train to this day. Excuse me. I can tell you exactly what happened to that train because I was on it. That train was liberated by Soviet troops in the north of Germany, almost on the Polish border, in a small town where it's not even a town, it's a village of 700 people. And I could talk about that, but that's a whole talk on itself, and I want to get to some points here. A train is liberated. I am on this train. It became known as the lost transport. Der verlorene Transport. Lost transport. 2,500 people started out on the train. Sickness, typhus, excrement. You can't imagine the conditions on the train. The train stopped. The train from Bergen-Belsen to the town where it was stopped at traveled for 13 days. I have personally driven that distance in under 4 hours multiple times. So you can imagine what the train was, what rate it was going. It was stopping. People got off the train to forage, to go into the fields, and to find something to eat, and to get some water. You can't imagine. The train also stopped to bury the dead. The train stopped to bury the dead. By the time the train was liberated by the Russian soldiers, over 600 people had died on the train. And the guy that buried the dead, who at the time was a 16 or a 17-year-old teenager, is alive and well today, over 100 years old, living in Israel. And I talk to him regularly. His name is Shlomo. And now, in this small town, a couple of things happen. My father dies. Typhus, malnutrition. His weight was under 50 pounds. My mother has a sign pinned to her by the Russian Red Cross, who came right away, by the Russian Red Cross, and the Russian Red Cross said, about to die. And my mother lived till age 75, and she was very proud of that sign. She kept saying, rumors of my demise are premature. You know this phrase. I am therefore an orphan walking around this town. Somebody's looking after me, I'm not sure who. And I and a group of kids are sent to the train station. I'll tell you which town in a minute, it'll come to me. I'm standing there, I remember in the dark, on a very gray, rainy day, in an outside train station, with a sign on my chest saying, Polak, Netherlands. That's it. And I'm with a group of kids, and it's the scariest day of my life, and continues to be the scariest day of my life, which I remember perfectly. I am not yet 3. I wind up in Holland, where I am adopted in a wonderful program of adoptions by Philips Industries, which is based in Eindhoven in Holland. And I'm adopted by a family. And little Joey lived happily ever after. Sorry. Here's what happens. Comes out better if I read it, okay? Spring 1946. I am riding breathlessly on the back of a scooter, my arms wrapped around the broken-in mail jacket in front of me, my head buried deep into it, one eye only taking in the colors, the sun. He and his wife had adopted me. I remember only his back, no face, no name. Gloriously we putter through Elysian fields of golden hay and summer greenery. Let this ride never end, I ask. It does. And we arrive at the Catholic hospital in Eindhoven. Gingerly he helps me down, fearful of my pallor, my fragility. We are in a room. Everything is white. The ceilings are very high. There is a woman in the white bed with the white bars, surrounded by the whole Catholic Church, nuns, priests. There wasn't a lot of room, and it was getting hot. Someone signals me to greet her. "Hello, madame," I say. The jacket that brought me this far says, "She is not madame. She is your mother." After the Holocaust. My mother? My whole being rebels at the word. My body shakes. Somewhere inside I scream a cry so grief-struck, so thunderous that no one is left in the room save for the woman in the bed. I look at her shattered form, her rheumatic deformed legs, the Holocaust madness still in her eyes. My mother? Not! I screamed silently. Not! The jacket has left, his warmth, his reassurance puttering into a distance not meant for me. Can a child actually want to die after the Holocaust? Joseph, she says, Joseph, yes, I am your mother. He doesn't seem to recognize you, the church says. It is possible that he isn't yours, isn't it? Children get lost, displaced, mix-ups are common. We really cannot let you keep this child unless we are sure he is yours. Whoever he is, you can be sure that the church will take very good care of him. She understands the stakes. She always does. That's how we survived. Joseph, she says, Joseph, come here. There is kindness in the horror of her form. I come. He doesn't recognize me, she says to the church, because the last time he saw me, I weighed 70 pounds less than I do now. Come, sit here, she says. We'll play a little. I want no part of her wretched, morbid form. I don't sit. I feel like I'm going to vomit. I don't understand the church, she says to the church. There are too many people in this room. How can I reacquaint myself with my child in the middle of a theater? Can you all please leave? The church leaves, save for one or two, ostensibly the decision makers. She speaks to me with love, gently, gently. Do you remember how we used to read Little Red Riding Hood together? How I would read one line, and you would finish the rhyme in the next line? She tries it. I respond haltingly with the rhymes. Soon I cannot control them. They pour out rhyme after rhyme, verse after verse. Thus did I sing that morning the poetry of Bergen-Belsen, of the corpses I played around, of the typhus feces that were my sandbox. Thus did I sing the song of the hunger and of the fever, of the cold that does not let up, of mother washing my body with her coffee rations. Thus did I sing then on the morrow after the Holocaust, of the rhymes of the angel of death. Thus did my song echo the rattle in father's chest as he reached up skyward to call out to his brothers, long gone in Sobibor, that he too was coming. The church leaves. There is the drawer in the white night table next to her white bed with the white bars. Open it, she says to me. Inside a small mountain of foil-covered chocolates, deep in the mountain, I rescue a small pair of tzitzis and a small, exquisite red prayer book, siddur. You are a Jew, she says to me, and Jews need these things. Our first conversation after the Holocaust. One more reading, and then we'll be done. Imagine it. Imagine it. The end of an era. The last person able to testify to all that transpired, to all that befell us. The last person who could affirm that we indeed saw what we saw is gone. Of all the rememberers, I alone am left to sit here, knowing that my time will also come. And then, what becomes of the tale? I am limited in what I remember. I was not yet 3 when the war ended. What value is there in the few horrific scenes I can conjure? The historical record is not enriched by them. My memory has become a datum, a relic, valid, but inessential. While they still lived, I stood among the other survivors, seasoned, wizened men and women who were perpetually old, prematurely gaunt. Their bodies reflected those days. The deep shadow of what they had once taken in never left them. They would glance at me in passing, surveying my inconsequentiality, often with patience, often without. I was a fly. Do you really know, child? They would ask. Do you really know what it is to have your parents shot before your eyes? Do you really know what it is to have your grandparents thrown out of the upstairs window during a liquidation? Did I know? I would put my hands in my pocket and shrug, looking in those early days for a cigarette. Did I know? The question was an accusation. You do not understand. They were saying you were too young to make sense of it. The carnage and death, the murder, the fever by hunger, all of which I witnessed, some of which I experienced, were not valid to them because I could not have made sense of such experiences as they occurred. My testimony was that of a blind man. I heard the noises, put it all together later. Not acceptable in a court of law, not sufficiently real. You say you were there, they argued, but you really weren't. Then they would appear astonished at the pain that came over my face from such invalidation and would hastily take pity. "Das gewesen Jingle," they would say. "It's not your fault. You were just a kid." Children, they meant, are frivolous. Let's not take their experiences seriously. They are all gone now. Their hoary heads and Polish teeth have crossed the great divide, and I alone am left to tell the tale. I'm a bit of a fake, don't you think? A bit of a liar, no? When those memories I did possess would beckon, I trembled. Sleepless nights would come on my lot, filled with chills and despairs. They were without solace, without consolation. I would not allow love. Love promised that what little memory I did have would be submerged. Love meant the cesspool that was Bergen-Belsen would disappear. When I was 10 years old, my father murdered. My mother married a man in Montreal who forbade mention of the Holocaust. Shall we let it disappear, I wondered? And if we did, would I continue being? I lived with him, but did not take up with him. I could not remember what brought me my nocturnal fits of madness. There were no visual scenes in my imagination when primordial terrors racked my body. I could not remember why I would periodically get mammoth rheumatic tremors that seized me in the darkness and in the light. I did not remember why Mother's moan of terror shuddered within me decades after she died. I knew that I was afraid of her, not for what she had been, but for what she had become. I knew that I did not want to have the toughness in her that allowed her to survive. Yet did it enter me, yet does it overtake me. It turns people away when they sense it. I am not easy to love. When I read that line to my kids, they say, don't be ridiculous. For all that, I did not visit my past, really never gave it a glance until I turned 50. Slowly, I stared at it. Slowly, with index cards, I put it into chronological order. The Hague, Westerbork, Bergen-Belsen, The Hague. Soon after the end of the Holocaust in Montreal, I fell in with other child survivors. They made up fully a third of my 7th grade class. We were silent about our past. When the topic came up, we would become restless and look about anxiously for distraction. We did not want to be witnesses. We just wanted to be like everyone else. Eventually, we each became an anti-witness. We didn't want to hear about it, talk about it. We pretended that the ordeal happened to others, to those who did have numbers on their arms. Perhaps we understood that the mature survivors constituted the most humiliated group of people on earth, and we wanted no part of their residual shame. Mother died when I turned 40. Freddie, who died a month ago, a tad older than I, came to sit with me at her shiva. Do you remember, Joseph, he said, do you remember how we used to play hide and seek around the corpses in Bergen-Belsen? I did not. But it was this question coming from him that allowed me to accept myself as a survivor. And it has taken nearly 3 decades following that shiva for me to have learned that what my mind does not remember, my body does, and so does my soul. Hesitantly, I take my place among the survivors. I get into the line at the gates of the death camps, and I am there more in death than in life. And so, I sometimes entertain this fantasy that because of my sheer youth during those years, I am the last witness. The Holocaust will pass out of experience and into history. There will be no one left to say, and they took my parents away and I never saw them again. Or Michael died in my arms. He had not eaten anything in 2 weeks, and his 9-year-old frame could no longer take it. Or my high school teacher examined all the boys in the class, and all the circumcised ones were expelled. Leery, I carry this fear that when I disappear, so will the last memories of that great darkness, so will the fecal stench that attended the typhus, so will the ravages of the outdoors that attended the roll calls, and the stiffness everywhere of the corpses. And in the absence of such primary memories, how long will it take for a civilized country again to allow a leader into office who harbors evil beliefs and insidious desires? And how long until the physicians and lawyers and judges and philosophers and writers and musicians and composers and conductors join his cause? I wonder, if I indeed turn out to be that last witness, will my death mark the beginning of the great forgetting? At such moments, fortunately, I have also come to realize the arrogance of such questions, and to understand that such arrogance is where idolatry and atheism begin. For I will not be the last witness. The last witness will be the greatest, the most humiliated witness of all. I speak, of course, of God himself. It is he who is everywhere, had to have been there too. He had to have been present, and he had to have witnessed his reputation as Redeemer and Savior of Israel sink into the mud of Treblinka and Belzec. What will the Egyptians say, Moses asks, when God threatens to destroy Israel after they worship the golden calf? Do you want us to say that you took the Jews out of Egypt only so that you might destroy them? The argument worked. He was averse to being misunderstood. No one came out of the Holocaust looking worse than God. He is compassionate, the theologians used to say. He hates evil, they claimed. Omnipotent, they said. Caring for his chosen people, the liturgy reads. Ha'on amo Yisrael beit shavam elav. He who answers the prayers of his people whenever they turn to him. Not this time. Not 6 million times. Yet although he did not save 6 million of his people, in an extraordinary reversal of roles and of history, his people, the ones who did survive, saved him. The last witness will join the legions of victims in the celestial palace that is touted as the place where Elijah, in God's presence, will provide the mighty answers, including one that deals with the great absence, while 1.5 million Jewish children were being murdered. 2 lines will form in heaven, each of them silent. No one will be asking Elijah a thing. The first line, with Dostoevsky as its guide, might say, Elijah, tell God that we really have no interest in post facto explanations about his great absence. It's just too late for explanations. Too much injustice, too much cruelty has been allowed to happen. The notion of an adequate answer to such horror is itself repulsive. Second line, forming the dialectic, would have Abraham as its guide. It might ask, it was never about us, Elijah. We never saw it and still don't need explanations. It was always about God. We just couldn't bear his vast humiliation. And we did what we could to mitigate it. Blessed be his name forever and ever. And were I the last witness, I would rage against both camps and ask, how dare they remain silent? What self-absorbed luxury were they indulging in anyway, when the memory of that time, of those children, is in danger of dissipating? Where is God? I would thunder at Elijah. Is he out there reciting the names of the camps? Belsen, Treblinka, Majdanek, Sobibor? Is he reading the names of the victims? I would pound the tables with both hands. Is he weeping? You don't have to ask anything, but I'm open to any questions.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Rabbi. You speak a lot about humiliation, and I'm curious how you see humiliation being passed down through the generations and how that plays out in your view.
It's an important question. When you're humiliated, you don't feel good about yourself. It's a piece of reality. That's what happens. And there's not a question that your kids sense that in you and take it on. Not identically, and it's not a perfect paradigm, but that's what happens. That's what happens. This is a wonderful thing that happened. Why did it happen to me? You And there's tremendous damage. That's all I can say. Tremendous damage.
Thank you again, Rabbi, for sharing from your heart so deeply. My question relates to your mom, and I was curious as to her second marriage. From what you said, the stepfather and her second husband had maybe a rule or a strong feeling that in this home we don't speak about the Holocaust. How did she navigate that? Did she agree? How did that work?
She suffered like a dog. She had to defend me, had to defend him, and it was a no-winner. I did not relent. He did not relent. For my bar mitzvah, is that me? Never mind. Sorry. For my bar mitzvah, I got a beautiful briefcase which had my name, Joseph, with his surname, which I did not take, on the bag. It was probably, in those days, a $50 leather bag. We're talking 1954 or something like that. And I put that briefcase in a closet and let it rot. Literally, it rotted there. I would not touch it. So it was a very strong feeling. He was not a bad guy. He was a decent, nice, good man. He knew next to nothing about fathering. He was an old bachelor, or older bachelor, and meant well. But it was very hard going for a kid.
This is just a very small literary question. The last passage that you read, I noticed that you said twice, it talked about I alone am left. Doesn't Elijah say that twice? And isn't that a frame of Elijah? Was that intentional, or am I missing?
Not intentional.
Okay.
Not intentional.
Yeah, I think it's...
No, you know who said that? It wasn't Elijah. It was the servant of Job. When the servant of Job comes back to say that his kids have all died, he says, I alone am left to tell the tale. Okay. That's where you're hearing it. That was certainly an unconscious thing, likely, on my part.
You're a rabbi. I thought maybe it was
Your intuition was correct, but your source was wrong. Okay.
Thank you again for speaking. Kind of in somewhat relation to what other folks have asked, I have found some of the most impactful, moving commentary about what happened during the Holocaust to come from yourself, and also before the pandemic, Walter Ziffer, when he gave speeches here at UNC Asheville. And when you're talking about this idea of, the experienced memory of the Holocaust is something that we are very close to the end of having. Again, you were 3, and you still have vivid memories, but in 20 years, who is going to be, in this auditorium saying, here was my personal memory of this experience? Again, as someone who feels very impacted by that firsthand experience, who or what do you think plays that role in 20 years? What would your vision be of making sure that memory is not lost, even if it is moved out of that lived experience?
I think that's the challenge I was laying before this audience, because it ain't going to be me. I'm 82, and today the claims conference in New York sent out a study of who was likely to be alive among survivors, but until when. And they've got a picture of a beautiful brown-haired woman, age 106, a survivor, talking about her experiences, and tough as nails and raring to go. I hope I get that kind of extended life, but you want to look at numbers, I wouldn't bet on it. And it's up to you. It's not up to me anymore. Jews are not good about this. They are not good about this. And maybe it's got to be other nations. Maybe you shouldn't go to the victims to call for memory to be preserved. May not be the role of the Jews. They may not be able to do it. I think other people are going to have to do it.
I wanted to ask, how did you emotionally deal with this throughout the years, and how did you stay sane and not completely crash into yourself? And I also wanted to ask, how does this affect your relationship with the divine? And wouldn't there be a sense of anger towards them? And how do you, again, stay sane with all the experiences that you've had?
So, first of all, not at all clear that I remain sane. That's, you may think so. I don't function well. I don't function well. Although if my kids were here, they would say, don't be ridiculous. But I know, the gifts that God gave me, I could have done a lot more to realize. But I'm very distracted. I'm very distracted. And those years and those expectations just hang over me and take over. I wouldn't say paralytic, not that far. And I'm certainly capable of great happiness and great pleasure. But I remember going to the synagogue when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. Before my mother remarried, I went for Yizkor when they said the memorial prayer for the dead. And I was a 6, 7-year-old boy sitting up in the women's section with my mother in the synagogue. And all that perfume and isn't he a cute little boy going on? And man, did I not want to be there. Boy, I mean, anything but there. And that comes from the humiliation, and that is a form of the humiliation. I mean, that's true for any kid that doesn't have a father. Just not having those two people there. And when you hear that only 25% of American homes have a mother and a father in it, you realize how big this problem is and what kind of a culture this is going to produce. Very sobering thought. But I have no problem with God. To the contrary, he probably has a problem with me. But I love God. I feel close. The greatest thing in my life, besides my family, is my Torah and my teachers who live with me wherever they are. I'm inspired. I have to be dragged to bed at night, away from my books, for my health. So, in some ways, it's been a rocky ride, but not a terrible one. And I'm grateful for all that I have. And I'm anxious to share, as you can see. I'm not getting paid for it tonight.
Hi, thank you, Rabbi. I was wondering, I'm thinking right now about the injustices in Gaza right now, and I was wondering if you could begin to say some words to people who are trying to stay faithful as these events continue and increase.
I'm going to answer you a little bit differently and not deal with the question directly because it's a minefield and it's going to take away from a lot of what I was saying tonight. But what I can tell you is that when the Jewish people were sitting in their own shit in Bergen-Belsen, eating each other, no one gave a hoot. No one gave a hoot. The United States did not give a hoot and knew everything. France did not give a hoot. They betrayed themselves. No one gave a hoot. Maybe Churchill, maybe. And that's changed. Because now, when there is a nation who in all its written forms have committed themselves to the murder and slaughter of the Jewish people, in written form, in unambiguous written form, that's what they live for, and they say so. It's not me it's saying so. I'm not attributing that to them. They're saying it. That's what they live for. It's a different kettle of fish now, because there is a Jewish army that's not going to allow that. And that was not true then. And the Jewish army is the best in the world. It is capable. It is flawed like any other army. It's never a clean story. A war is never a clean story. Never the way we want it to be. But 1.5 million children ain't going to happen again.
Thank you.
You said you've lived in Dutch. Do you consider yourself an American or Dutch or?
So I wanted to become an American, and I went to the Dutch embassy to try and work it out. Whoa, did I get told off. You're a betrayer of the Dutch people. I said, yeah. I can tell you who did the betraying. It wasn't Joe Polak here. Forget about it. So I am an American. I'm also a Jew, but I obviously don't think that that's a contradiction in terms. You know, this is not an anti-religious country, and there are multiple parts to my identity. I'm an opera singer. See.
So I was curious, what inspired you specifically to tell this story? Because I know for a lot of places across Europe, like specifically like France, it was widely accepted to kind of keep it quiet, and not talk about this history. And you mentioned in your book that being that lone survivor and that lone memory. I was just curious what really inspired you to go forward with coming out about such horrific things and telling that story when it was so widely accepted to just not tell it in other places.
When I worked at Boston University, I had the most amazing gift from God. It's called a parking spot. And I put my car next to the Hillel building for close to 43 years, every Shabbat. And I walked to Hillel from my house, and I walked home. And sometimes I would walk to services at Hillel and pass my car and say, that's my car. I have a car. And I suddenly realized that having that car sit there right, was a form of testimony. That I was saying to the world that I don't work or operate machinery on the Sabbath to teach that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. My car and I were a team. We were testifying. That's what a Jew does. A Jew testifies. He says what it is, and he says that nothing is done in the absence of God. God is present. What God wants to do with it is his business. And I'm not always happy with it. But my job is to testify about the Sabbath, to testify about the great teachings of the Torah. That's my job. That's why I tell my story.
Rabbi, I greatly appreciate you taking your time to tell your story. Stemming from the question he raised back here, just along with your experiences, you know, if you could pinpoint one, I'm sure you could talk on this for a while. What's the biggest lesson you want, you know, the world to learn from one of the most catastrophic events in human history?
Do not stand idly by. When bad stuff is happening, act. That's what I want people to. That could have prevented the Holocaust. Mr. McCloy would not let them bomb Auschwitz. He would not raise a finger to help the Jews. Neither did Mr. Stalin, neither did anybody else. It was pathetic. And when bad things start to happen, you have to lie down on the roads and not let the car pass. You have to say, we cannot go on with our day-to-day life when this is happening. I can tell you how upset I am that they are killing Christians in Ethiopia and in half a dozen other places. No one cares. No one cares. No one cares. And you have to open your mouth. You may live here and they may live in Ethiopia. And you are limited in what you do. But until you try, you don't know. That's my response. That you have to be critical. You have to write. You have to publish. You have to tell the world. And today, it's a different world. Today, we have online. Anybody can write and everybody will read it. It's a different time.
So in our class, we've learned that after every major anti-Jewish, I'm right here, sorry. We learned that, Israel, Palestine, history and literature. We learned that after every major anti-Jewish or some kind of Jewish catastrophe, there's always poetry being written. And the last passage you were reading sounded like the poetry that we read. Now, obviously, we have memoirs and stuff to see how what they were feeling or how they were feeling when they wrote it. But I wanted to ask you, since you're also a rabbi too, what is your relationship with God when you were writing that, and what were you thinking? Not in a bad way, but what were you thinking when you wrote that down? What was going through your head when you wrote down that last passage?
It's a really good question, because some of that writing is my own poetic process at its best. And the answer to your question is, it just comes out. It just comes out. It's there. If it wasn't there, it wouldn't come out. And it's suddenly a piece of my deepest thoughts found its voice. That essay it was first published in Commentary in 98, 99, something like that. And they rejected it the first time.
Why?
Huh? I don't know. And then it went in. I'm bragging now. So I called the editor. I said, why did you publish? You said you weren't publishing it. He said it was too damn good. When something true and beautiful comes from inside, and you don't even know where it's from, that's writing at its best.
Were you writing it, like expressing, like what you had gone through, but also like your relationship with God?
Yeah,
Is that also,
which is love.
Yeah.
I love God. I have no ambivalence about that. I have no ambivalence about that. But I can talk to him.
Hi, I wanted to ask about how your faith and love and follow through with the tradition of Judaism has helped you throughout the years overcome the horrible experiences of your youth.
For Jews, it doesn't work exactly that way. I don't think we're guided by faith. We have faith. I'm not knocking faith. We're guided by the religious life. We're guided by observing the commandments. We're guided by living the Sabbath. We're guided by eating the kosher laws. We're guided by taking care of people. We're guided by acts of kindness. When we go to bed at night, that's what we need to pull together and say, this is how much I did today of that. That's what takes it. The faith is very nice. And not, I just want to repeat, I'm not against faith. I get in trouble if I say but I'm not. I'm not against faith. Faith is the right thing and so on. But what really carries us, what carries Jews, is the religious life, the day-to-day religious life. The Torah says that in the temple, they brought 2 lambs in the morning as a sacrifice, and 2 lambs in the afternoon as for the afternoon sacrifice. And it's the regularity of the religious life, that is compelling, and that has carried the Jewish people. There's a story that Elie Wiesel wrote that really happened. He made a play out of it. And the story is that a group of very high-level rabbis, real super scholars and wonderful men, holy men, got together outside of barracks in Auschwitz, and they put God on trial. And they wanted to see if God was guilty or innocent of betraying the Jewish people. And they argued for a long time. And then they came to a unanimous conclusion that God was guilty. And then the next thing they said, well, we have to daven Maariv, which means now we have to go and say the evening prayer. That's Jewish life.
Thank you.
Thank you again and for coming and speaking today. I'm meeting a federal judge tomorrow with another class, and with your own relationship to jurisprudence with Rabbinical Court, do you have any questions or advice you would like me to convey?
Yeah. Tell him you spoke to this weird guy at UNC the other day, and remind him that in Westerbork they had a Supreme Court justice as a prisoner.
Thank you.
Rabbi, you described Westerbork as something of a conditioning grounds for making people more docile in being transported to other camps, more polite, more however you would like to phrase it, accommodating. What conditions, other than the other than being relatively livable and in the account of the nurse providing a sense of hope to them, what conditions do you think actually made people more accommodating?
Fear. Fear of the unknown. There were 10,000, often 10,000 prisoners at a time in Westerbork. Do you know how many SS officers and Dutch police were there to guard them? Yeah. So what they were afraid of is of the unknown, justifiably. Something must have gotten back to the people. I think it may have been, people conjecture, that they never got a postcard. I mean, Westerbork had a mail system. You could send people letters in Westerbork.
Thank you for everything tonight. In the current political climate, we're seeing increasing dehumanization and a sense of hostility towards minorities that we saw right before the Holocaust. What can we do as people living in at this juncture to prevent this, what feels like a 1930, from escalating?
I think you get people to preoccupy themselves with the truth. That you cannot listen to rumors. You cannot say that measles vaccines give you other bad things. Got to get people on the right track to say, the analogy I like to use is the colorblind guy who keeps telling you the carpet is gray when you know that it's red. Carpet is not gray. And just because he sees it as gray doesn't make it gray. And that's true with identities. That's true with everything. People have to be all this crap about the protocols of the elders of Zion, the book Hitler loved most, complete nonsense from cover to cover. And everybody knows.
It was already debunked at the time that Hitler was spreading it.
Yeah, but enough people believed it, right, that they voted for him.
Yep.
So one has to, that's my argument, that to not let inane theories and inane concepts rule, and to work very, very, very hard to make people who believe that stuff feel like they're idiots. That's a political goal that I would have. And that requires truth. And that's very, very hard on the internet. I don't underestimate how hard that is. The internet is a great blessing, and it's a great curse, and to work with it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to speak with us. For people who don't want to hear a truth, or think that the research is wrong or anything along those lines that are growing the fear within people, how would you navigate those relationships or those conversations? Yes.
I think that you navigate those experiences is to work hard with the person on the argument that just because you believe something doesn't make it true. That has to be, you have to find analogies and find ways to show that. And you can give examples from people's lives where they believe something their whole life very, very strongly, and it turned out to be nonsense. Great scientists show what people believed, 200 years ago about illnesses that you get from wherever you get them from, what kind of nonsense it was, and how smart the people were that would believe that. That's important to do. Well, unless we clean up the level of intellectual conversation and help people argue well, I'm a great believer that the truth will always prevail in those situations. I'm optimistic about it, even though, as I said across the room a minute ago, it's much harder in the age of the internet, where anything can be said and anything goes. Okay? Okay, any other questions you have, come on up.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for being here tonight.